pleasure to welcome you this morning to Forum. If you are new and you are not on our emailing list, see me or Kathy Hebers. Kathy, where are you? Yeah. Kathy's right there in the yellow. And we can add you to our email list, and that way every Saturday you get an email telling you about the upcoming speaker. Kathy and I and the rest of the facilitators for Forum are super excited to introduce a new facilitator who's going to be helping us out. I could tell you all about her, but I would guess most of you know Judy Ann Files. So let's give her a warm applause. So as you know, most of the facilitators, we take a different week each month. It's our turn, and then sometimes based on our schedules, we switch around and trade off with one another. So you'll start seeing Judy in as well. So we thank her for joining our Forum team and helping us get organized and think of new topics and put together a program for you every Wednesday morning. So this week, we are honored to welcome Representative Marc Catlin to the Forum. He is fresh off of a whirlwind legislative session. I think he's probably been trying to catch up on his sleep for the last week. They just wrapped up, gosh, was it just last Friday or a week and a half ago? A week and a half ago, but time just goes like that, doesn't it? Yes. Marc was appointed to fill a vacancy left by Don Coram when Don Coram was appointed to fill a vacancy in the Senate left by Ellen Roberts. And then Representative Catlin ran for election and was elected by the folks here in House District 58 and has been serving as our state representative. So let's give him a warm round of applause to welcome him.
My, how you've grown. Well, this is a great facility. It looks to me like it's going to be good for the Forum. You know, I talk to people and tell them, well, I've got to go down and talk at Heidi's Forum. And they, are you sure? Well, yeah, you can go talk to Heidi's Forum. It's not there anymore, Mark. So, you know, people take good care of it. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. It's much better to be here than it is to be in Denver, believe me. One thing I found out is Denver is not a good place to live. I would not recommend it for any of you. If you've just come from Denver, welcome. I'm sure you realize that life is better now. You know, we came home a week ago Monday, and you sometimes feel like one of those wind-up toys. And I think my spring was wound so tight that once it started to unwind, I was just bing, bang, 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 all over it. Now I'm kind of in the rest and restore method. My wife thinks I've gone completely lazy because I want to take a nap about every 15 to 20 minutes. But it was a wild session. 2019 was something that I don't know if I was prepared for it. I never really thought about what it was going to look like, how it was going to go about. But when we got there, things were much different. When the session opened, the counts, you know, you've heard about the trifecta and all those things, where the opposition party now controls all three branches of government, all three houses. The House of Representatives, where we sat, came out at 41-24. 41 Democrats, 24 Republicans. For those of you who played football, 41-24 is a pretty good butt kicking. And we had it. But one of the things that we did find is that a lot of the people that were newly elected came on board. They didn't have a lot of experience. Like I was not ever in elected politics. Well, a lot of the folks that got elected this year were activists in their communities. So when they got to the House of Representatives, rather than thinking about, okay, I need to be a legislator, their experience was to be an activist. So there were a lot of speeches given as though we were still on the campaign trail. You know, an old timer told me after I got there, he said, you've been elected, stop campaigning. And that was really good advice, because then you can sit down and start thinking about what can I do? What kind of bills can I be on? What should I co-sponsor? Some of those kind of things. It'll take a little time for people to get comfortable with that role, and I hope that they will. There were times that there were a lot of confrontation, consternation, anger, you know, those kind of things. One of the things with me, I don't play that way. You know, if I have to, I'll just leave the room for a few minutes so I don't end up, you know, showing my tail feathers. And that's, you know, that's helped me. It keeps me from getting up, you know, in the rafters being upset, being worried about my state, or those kind of things, because what's going to end up happening is we're going to have to figure this out. All of us. There were some bills that concerned me deeply. And there were some things that happened that were probably concerned them deeply. Because the only thing that we had on our side of the aisle was time and to do things technical. When you have that big a vote change, you have to sometimes slow things down and try to put a lot of amendments on. Maybe the amendment sticks, or maybe it doesn't. There were some massive hearings in the House of Representatives. Of the national popular vote and some of those kind of things, people were there by the hundreds to testify. You know, I stayed in a committee hearing until like 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought that was going to be the record, but they ended up with one at 4:30 in the morning. Because there were that many people there that were that concerned, and they wanted to testify. They wanted their voices heard. And you know, when you want your voice heard, you will pay that price. And you know, it was interesting to see how many Coloradans were that concerned, or they wanted to be able to testify on that bill specifically. You know, surprisingly, we did pass some bills that are probably going to be okay for the state of Colorado. You know, when you read the newspaper a lot of times, or TV news, or those kind of things, they want you to see the tough stuff. They want you to believe that there was absolutely no cooperation whatsoever. And depending on who's writing it, if it's right or left, they spin it the way their side feels. But there were some things that were done that were probably going to be good for the state of Colorado. I didn't want to come home and talk to you folks about, oh my gosh, it was the worst thing I've ever seen. There were some tough days, believe me. But there were some bills, you know, and I wondered how many bills will I be able to run? What kind of bills will I be able to do? Well, ever since I got appointed, and now since I've been reelected, my whole focus has been on what are bills that are good for the Western Slope, particularly the 58th District. Montrose County, San Miguel County, Montezuma County, and Dolores County. You know, Dove Creek matters to me just as much as we do. Dove Creek, Cortez, Telluride, and Montrose, and all of those small communities in between. So the bills that I run are something that I think has an impact on us. You know, what would that be? Well, I ran a bill on, this will surprise some of you, on ditch easements. Water being the thing where I'm at. The ditch easement bill, what it's going to do is it strengthens the person who has the easement across the property so that they can put it in pipe, they can work on it. We thought that we'd always had that, right? And pretty much we had. When Colorado was typically agriculture, nobody thought about whether or not you went out there and you ran the ditch or you backhoed it and you took care of it so it would carry water. But as we have suburbanized, some of those properties are now subdivisions or places where people live. So folks have been going in and buying 2 semi-loads of donies about this big and lining that ditch to where it looks like a creek and it acts like a creek. And then the farmer that lives downstream from it comes into their, knocks on the door and says, we're going to put that ditch in pipe. Oh, now we've got a problem. And there have been a number of lawsuits in regards to that, particularly on the eastern slope. We will see them here as we start to grow more and more. So this piece, what it does is it says that the guy that owns the water right will have the opportunity to pipe or improve those ditch easements so that they carry water better. Now, part of the reason that I ran that bill is it's kind of a three-legged stool. One is, we have to be able to improve the delivery systems for these irrigation waters, for any kind of water. We have to improve that. Because an open ditch, dirt line, seeps, leaks, and has problems. Causes problems with people downhill from it, seepage and leakage. That's one thing. We can do that, and we did that this year. The second thing is if the state of Colorado is serious about water conservation, we need to go about figuring out how we can get some dollars to the idea that we are going to pipe and line these laterals so that that water doesn't leak and seep away from the state of Colorado, not just the water right holder. Because the low-hanging fruit for water conservation is these open ditches that we see in our valley, and we've got miles, 575 miles of them. We need to get those underground or get them lined so that they don't seep and leak and lose as much as 25% of the water that's carried in that ditch. That's the second way. The third thing we need to be able to do is we need to be able to generate some funds to do this. With the Bureau of Reclamation here and the water users, we got some grants from them in order to pipe and line laterals. The state of Colorado, in my opinion, needs to be able to say, okay, you guys can get a grant for 70%. Well, if the landowner or the water right holder can't raise the 30%, then the project goes undone. But if the state of Colorado could help with 15%, then we might see some real traction. And we start to pipe and line these laterals because we are going to be short of water. We know that. But if we can save the water that we're losing, then we don't have to shut down a farm. We don't have to lease the land off and leave the water in the river because that water that we're saving gets to be that we've conserved. We can do other things with it. So that's the third step of that. And in order to do that, we have to, as the state of Colorado, make some of those funds available. Now, typical politician, he's up there talking about, well, we got to get some more money into more people's hands. I think the state of Colorado is serious about water conservation because you read about it almost every other day in the newspaper. You know, we're talking about lease and fallow. Well, lease and fallow just leaves empty ground. Well, every acre of ground in this valley that has irrigated agriculture on it generates about $300 to $500 of economic activity that cascades down the Main Street. If that ground is blank, no money was spent. Now producers co-op doesn't sell as much fertilizer, they don't need as many men. So you can see it go all the way down through the shoe store, and we'll end up in the school and in the sheriff. We need to think about that. The idea of buy and dry, buying a piece of land and just leaving the water running it. That's an extreme measure. Hopefully we don't have to go to that. Now the big cities on the eastern slope are doing it. But they have to do that in order to generate what they say is firm yield for a 50-year need. We're going to get that too. We're growing. The state of Colorado is supposed to be double the population by 2050. Somebody better start thinking about it right away. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to talk about in regards to, I sat on the Rural Affairs and Ag Committee. Now the Rural Affairs and Ag Committee used to be Ag, Livestock, and Natural Resources, but they changed the name of it. Because the Rural Affairs Committee allows us to take a look at things like broadband, to take a look at other issues out here in rural Colorado, and we've heard some of those bills. I didn't like the name change. I still don't. I would like to see Ag and Rural Affairs. But, okay, we don't need to fight about that today. We didn't see a lot of Ag bills this year because the intentions and the focus was not so much on agriculture and natural resources. It was more focused upon social issues, healthcare, and the cost of healthcare. Those were really big items, and they've been big items in Colorado for a number of years. One of the bills that I carried this year was called Study of the Public Option. Now, first, right off the bat, people thought that I was just going to single payer, and that's all that I was concerned about, was going to be single payer. That's not the purpose of that bill. The purpose of that bill is to study what would it look like, what would it cost, can the state of Colorado do it, and if we can do it, then another bill has to be run in 2020 to start putting that into place. The study will probably look at single payer, Medicaid, Medicare for all, some combination of private public. One of the things that I'm hoping they will look at, when I think some of you can remember, I'm old enough to remember, a product called Cover Colorado. And that was for people who could not buy insurance anywhere else. Because at one time, if you were a felon, you couldn't buy insurance, for example. So this bill is going to take a look at those kind of products and see what they cost. Can we do it? If we did do it, what would it look like? And see, this study is supposed to be brought back to us on the health insurance, on the health committees by November of 1990. Boy. Too many 19s. By November of 19. And we'll look at that and they'll make their report. There'll be something like 25 people on that commission. They'll come from the state of Colorado, they'll come from insurance, they'll come from healthcare, they'll come from consumers. Then the study's done, they make a report to us, and we have an opportunity to take a look at that. I'm hoping that it's something that will work and that it's something we can afford, because one of our concerns has always been, what will the cost be? Because we're spending money like crazy. The budget this year is $30.2 billion. You know, I can't conceive of how many dollar bills or $100 bills would be stacked out here in the parking lot in order to get to that. But that's what our budget is. So, all right, let's take a look. Let's do a study. I also carried a bill called Out-of-Network. Out-of-network billing is one of the problems we've got with our systems, is that if you're in a network and you go to the hospital and you get an operation done and everybody's in the network, you know what the cost's going to be. But we do have places where people show up, or you have to see a doctor that's not in your network, and they were allowed to bill pretty high. I had an individual from the eastern slope of Colorado showed up at my office. He'd had a procedure done. It was, pretty intense, something to do with his spine. And he got an out-of-network bill of $83,000. After he checked all the check marks, figuring that everything that was going to happen with him was going to be inside network. So he knew he had the money to do that and all those kind of things. 4 months later, he got this bill for $83,000. So he's in my office because he was in Denver, going to go talk to the federal land bank or somebody to make a loan to him, and he's going to take out a loan so we can pay that bill. I don't think that's what we started out wanting, and that bill passed. We did set some benchmarks so that the people that are outside of network will be paid at 200% of Medicaid, or Medicare. That allows them to make money. But you can't run rampant, because what's happening is we've got people that are having liens put on their property from out-of-network billing. That would be frightening, because if you're retired, what do? How's this going to work? So that's one that I was proud to be on, and that's one of the things I think that's going to be important. In my campaign last year, one of the things that we found out is healthcare on the western slope of Colorado is either number 1 or number 2 on people's minds. We've got folks here that are paying $2,500 a month for insurance with a $12,000 each deductible. That's not insurance. People are having to tap into their retirement accounts to pay their monthly bill. That's not insurance. I'm hoping that we're going to see some movement forward. And even both parties are starting to talk about it to a certain degree now. We're not just throwing down the gauntlet and say no, never, forever, no. I think the fear is single payer, because nobody knows what it looks like. You know, we have pictures in our mind of what it might look like. But in reality, I don't think we've sat down long enough at the table to say, okay, this is how that might work. Maybe that bill, studying it, will help with that. And one of the reasons for doing that bill was, it was real early in the session. And it seemed to me, and these were some of the things that I was thinking, is if this study is out there and it's not completed, it wouldn't be good politics to just jump off the cliff and say, okay, we're going to do single payer, without even looking. So there was some strategy to that. And, you know, it's kind of like playing three-level chess every once in a while. You know, we did some pretty good things over there. I don't want to just talk about I, me, and mine all the time. Hang on a minute. Let's talk about some of the things that worried me. Giving up our vote in the electoral system worries me deeply. The speech that I gave that day in regards to that bill was, now the state of Colorado is going to find out what it feels like to be from rural Colorado when your vote doesn't count. And I don't think people got that. But you know, over here on the west side of the mountain, on election night, 10 minutes after our polls closed, they announced that we had a new governor. You know, it didn't matter how we voted, because those urban areas carried the vote. We suffer the same thing that they were suffering when they wrote the Constitution, when they decided we're going to vote this way. The urban areas, with so many people, control a lot of what happens in the country and in the state. Colorado has all of our population from just out Colorado Springs to Denver, to Boulder, to Fort Collins. If they decide that they want to do something, it's probably going to happen, because we don't have enough people in rural Colorado to make a big difference with that. So it worries me that we will be throwing in with the larger cities to throw our electoral college votes to that side of the market. It hasn't happened yet, but it did pass, and it's been signed. I think the state legislature missed the boat, missed the point, on the red flag bill. The red flag bill to me was not necessarily about guns. It was about mental health. And we tried very hard to amend that bill so that we were talking about mental health rather than the first thing we do is go get the guns and leave the guy there. Because what ended up happening with that bill is that if there is a complaint filed and it's verified, the guns are removed from that person. But we leave that person right there where he's sitting. Now he's got even more anger, so to speak. Because it's not just guns that kill people. We've seen that. So I think we missed the boat on that a little bit. Mental health is a big issue in the state of Colorado. It's a giant issue on the western slope because we don't have the beds, the mental health beds. The giant sucking sound in the state of Colorado is Denver. The money's gone because they put it into where they're going to go. They don't have enough beds. So any money that's generated has to really be identified to go to western Colorado or wherever you want it to go. I tried to put a piece on the budget that said $2 million for Cortez to build some more beds. It didn't happen. But we did raise the issue. We did say we don't have enough beds. We don't have enough beds in Montrose. So mental health is something we're going to have to start dealing with. Now we're starting to take a look at opioids and the opioid crisis. We're starting to put some money towards that. And a lot of people seem to think that that's where our main mental health issue is in opioids. But I don't agree with that. I think it's a problem. Of course I think it's a problem, because we're losing people, they're dying. But on the other side of mental health, we're losing people, they are dying because of depression, because of all of the different maladies that we suffer. We need to be thinking about that, we in the legislature. Because I hear it from you. You tell me. You know, we either know someone or somebody's in our family who's struggling. A lot of us do. What do we do to help them? Those are the kind of things that I'm hoping that this General Assembly, the 72nd General Assembly, I'm hoping that we'll be able to focus a little more on that. Now, the next session in January, people are going to be thinking about running for re-election. They're going to be running for, you know, to move up or to move sideways, to do whatever they do. So there might be a little more sanity in the next session. Because it took about 2 months for things to settle down. There were, I think, 600 bills right around there. We passed 438. You know, when I first got over there, I said, you know, if Colorado's in that bad a shape, we need that many bills, maybe we should just fire everybody and start over. Because, you know, every time we pass something, they have to change those books. The printer's really making a ton off of this. But then I found out Colorado's the printer. So could I get a glass of water? So, when we get over there, and for example, red flag bill, oh, it was just, the Capitol was full. People wanted to testify. They did testify. They testified for, against. Committees are split up in proportion to how the House looks. So if we were split 50-50, then the committee would be 50-50. The way it turned out was every committee is 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans. So usually the votes come out 7-4. You know, good opposition. One of the things that happens when you sit on committee, I sat on the Rural Affairs Committee, I sat on Health and Insurance Committee, and then I substituted into this, to the Education Committee. Then an individual got appointed, so I was transferred to the Transportation Committee and Local Government Committee. So I sat on enough committees this year to really see some of the things that were happening in the state capitol. Thank you. Those committees are really where the action was this year. Transportation, not so much. We did get $100 million we put into transportation this year, which will make it, I think, $300 million that we're going to have to spend. One of the things that did happen is they postponed the vote for 2019 on that Senate Bill 2, Senate Bill 1 from last year. That's where we were going to ask you if we could bond, because this last election we had two bills, 2 issues on the ballot. One was, can we raise this fuel and sales tax? 2, can we borrow money against the good name of the state of Colorado, bonding? Both of those failed, which is interesting, because the state of Colorado does not want anything to do with more tax. Yet we are passing more and more bills about social issues, social expenditures, and not wondering where's the money going to come from. Which leads me to the next bill that concerned me deeply. That was Senate Bill 181, the oil and gas bill. Oil and gas is the largest industry in the state of Colorado. It's like $1 billion to the state. Yet we passed a bill that said local communities can approve or disapprove applications for drilling in their jurisdictions. So we asked about local control. All right, if that's the case, can this community go with less regulations than the state's forward? No, we can't. So the state's floor is where it starts. Now, if the community wants to ratchet that up and make it that much harder, then they can do that. There is a lot of concern in the state of Colorado right now about oil and gas. They've been the golden goose. The other thing that was concerning is the state of Colorado has the most stringent rules and regulations about oil and gas of any state in the union. Already. But yet we've moved on beyond them. For example, in Montezuma County, there are 150 wells down there. They're 50% of the tax base for that county. They're 60% of the schools. Now, those wells can continue to operate until they want to change something or they want to get a new permit. Now, all the other rules start taking place. People don't know what we're going to do. How does this fit? Where do we go? I think there was concern about some explosions that happened over there from orphan lines and orphan wells, and those kind of things, and I don't blame the people. They should be pretty well identified by any local jurisdiction, city or county. They should know where those are. That's one of the reasons we got the 811 bill, which is that if you want to do something in your yard, you have to call 811 and have it located so that there isn't that. All right, that's inconvenient, but it works. We were concerned that if you dug a post hole, you're going to have to have that done. Not necessarily. So we're kind of in flux. The community wants to say, we want to be more careful, we want to be more careful, but we forget about how careful we've already been. So I'm concerned about that we'll go too far. And that happens. I mean, we've all lived through pendulum swings. From when we were kids, it was this way. When we were older people, it was this way. So right now, I think the whole country and the whole world is in flux because the pendulum doesn't know where it's going to come down and how long will it stay there. But oil and gas is a concern because our severance tax is generated off of that, and severance tax runs DOLA, which is the Department of Local Affairs. That's where the grants come from that we see here in Montrose that help us move forward. If that's defunded, what happens? There won't be that many grants. The other part of severance tax is that's what we would use to build water projects or to build improvements to the water projects. How do we go about that now? Well, one way we're talking about going about that is that since sports gambling has been approved by the Supreme Court, the state of Colorado is now getting into the game and wanting to ask you, the voter, if we can legalize sports gambling off your phone. I mean, people are doing it already, but there's no revenue to the state. So we're going to ask you, the voter, is it okay to have legalized gambling in the state of Colorado? And we're going to put a minimum of $10 million per year into water projects. That'll be the main recipient for those revenues that come in off that mobile gambling. That's an estimate. And it's probably low because this is really popular. It was a surprise to me when we heard that bill of how popular gambling is. And I get it. My heart thumps when I scratch off the deal and think, oh, well, I didn't win. Because that's what always happens. I haven't won more. But this is big business. So what we're going to do is this would run it through the casinos so that there's regulation. There's a 10% surcharge put on it. That's what comes to the state. There is dollars left in that revenue stream that we will put into gambling addiction. Thinking about, let's think that down the road a little bit. It's not a whole lot of money, but it opens the door and it leaves a place setter for that problem. Now, how large is it? I don't know. We're human beings. We can get addicted to almost anything, I'm addicted to feeling good. I just want more of it. So that's one that's going to come up. There will be another one. There'll be another voting question on whether or not we should, I don't know how I want to put this. The question will be if you, the voter, want to forego any future refunds out of the taxpayers' Bill of Rights. So currently, and it's one of the things that's happened is half the people in the state of Colorado have never gotten a rebate. So they're not aware of it. Because we've grown. We are going to ask you if you want to forego that and leave those dollars in the state of Colorado to do with what they say. They're talking about transportation, education, and environment, I believe. But that's going to be a question on the ballot in 2019. You will hear more about it than you've ever wanted to. So I'm just going to be the first guy and I won't talk about it anymore, okay? Because you know how campaigns work. Oh, we got some money left, let's buy some more ads. That's one that concerns me because we're in good times right now. The last 2 years, the state of Colorado has spent $1 billion more than we had projected coming into the state of Colorado in revenue. So why are we asking you, can we keep the refund? Because right now we've got the money. You can tell we've got the money because of all the programs and new things that the state of Colorado is doing. They're not as evident over here on this side of the mountain, but on the eastern slope they are, particularly in the urban corridor. So one of the things you do when you're in state legislature, so you guys have a feel for this, you run a bill of your own, you go get somebody to co-sponsor it, and you put it on, and it goes through the committees, comes to the House floor, it goes voted up or down. If it's voted yes, it goes to the Senate, they do the same thing. If the Senate starts the bill, they do the same thing, but it comes to us. So when we do those kind of things, there are a lot of opportunities for me to co-sponsor with the Democratic Party. And all of my bills have a Democrat sponsor on it with me, for two reasons. One, I want it to pass. Two, it does help with the conversations because people feel like they can come and talk to you. It's not just a Republican bill. It's something that's good for maybe the state of Colorado. That's worked for me. When you have a co-sponsor, one of the things that happens is there's a lot more conversations about those kind of things. And the co-sponsor can also happen at the third, okay, we got through the vote at the floor. We hear all of the debate, then there's a recorded vote. The way it happens is the first reading comes to committee, and then the second reading, we debate it. And that's a voice vote on the floor, aye or nay. If it passes the second reading, it goes to third reading, and the third reading is where the recorded vote takes place. So it's either yes or no. But then there's a record of that. At that point, if it's a good bill and it looks like it might work, you can co-sponsor it right there. I've done that. Because I wasn't on the bill, I didn't hear it at the committee, I heard some of the debate, and when it comes down for the final vote, if it's a good bill, put your name on it, because that said it was good for your community. You see people that say, oh, I passed 100 bills. Part of that's because they co-sponsored the thirds. Todd Quorum, for the other side, he actually sponsored 71 bills last year. I didn't do that. I think I've got 17 or 18 bills that were on our own, and we passed them. Some of them had to do with, the Indian tribes down in my district, making things a little easier for them. Not so much about money or those kind of things, but making it easier when an individual identified themselves as a member of a tribe, that we got right to it to find out if they were, so that then they could be taken to the tribe have care given to them by their people. That seemed to make sense to me. How long do you want to go?
Well, we're done at 9, so if you want a question, you have 20 more minutes total.
Okay, I think they sent me an email saying 20 minutes I was supposed to ask for questions. So, if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them, or try to.
And I will pass this mic around for questions.
Thanks, Mark. Sounds like you have your hands full. You touched a little bit on the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and there's a focus group coming out on Building a Better Colorado, which is looking at Tabor, Gallagher, and Amendment 23. And all of those were passed by the citizens without regard for how they're going to fit together, and the legislators are going to be able to work with those. What do you think is going to happen with that? Because I mean, they all are part and parcel affected by each other.
You know, I think any one of those by themselves would have been great. But when we're having now a perfect storm, with the three of them with their demands, Colorado is getting hamstrung, and we're not able to react as quickly as we could as a government and as a state. My opinion, I'd like to see us work on Gallagher first. I think Gallagher is the one, because what it does is it pushes down. And then when you get down, if something happens, Tabor refuses to let it go up. So we can't respond through our property tax the way we would be if we didn't have it. So it has saved some money. But one of the things that Gallagher has done is it's put the onus on properties that are owned for business and for those kind of things. And they're paying 30% of what their value is, and it's really a high rate. So we want to keep Colorado open for business, but that's one of the things we keep hearing is, man, your property taxes are too high. Because we're seeing our property values shoot up like this. We would think that since our property taxes are shooting up, or our property values are shooting up like this, that we'd have all the money we could use. But with Gallagher, it keeps it down. Gallagher is where I would go first to answer that question straight up. Colorado is now getting pretty busy about putting more money into education. We passed the kindergarten for all. People wondered about that. I like that bill. I put my name on it early on because I like the idea of that money being put in our schools, and that frees up money for the school district to do other things with. Whether it be teacher salary, whether it be improvements, those kind of things, it allows the school board to make up their own minds. Tabor is complicated. I mean, it's to the point where there are people that have written books about Tabor. What it really does is it says that the spending can't grow more than population and the cost of living, and then anything over that has to come back to the people. I've only been there 3 sessions. And the legislature can figure out a lot of ways to keep it from going back to you. But I do think one of the things in the state of Colorado that makes us very unique is we do have the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, to where you have to be asked, you want to raise tax? Very few places in the U.S. have it. Colorado's been a leader in that. I like that idea. Could it be revamped to a certain degree? Probably. And that's what these folks are going to be doing. So I hope I answered that question as quickly and as easily as I could. Here's another. You guys need another cup of coffee.
In your opinion, the gas taxes have not been raised in decades. Why is there so much resistance to raising the basic gas taxes for infrastructure?
You know, that's a good question, because you would think that that would fix it. But one of the things that we've got going on in the state of Colorado, we have a lot more cars, getting a lot better gas mileage. So if we raise the sales tax, raise the fuel tax, it doesn't generate that much money. Because, you know, I think when they set it up, we were getting like 10 or 12 miles to the gallon. Now, we're getting cars that are, you know, up here in the 30s. So one of the things that happens with fuel tax is that if we were still as inefficient as we were in the late 80s, early 70s, or late 70s, early 80s, then maybe it would make us some money. To raise it, I'm not against it. I think it would, you know, let's do everything we can. But from what they tell me, that won't generate the return that the state of Colorado needs. So they're thinking about, you know, mileage taxes and all these other crazy ideas. I think we take a look at how the state of Colorado does things. We are going to get in such a deep hole as far as transportation is concerned, we're going to have a really hard time digging ourselves out. We're like $9 billion behind the 8 ball right now. Every year we get worse, and you and I see it. We see we see things. You know, they tell me, well, we need 2 or 3 more lanes on I-70 and I-25. I said, you know, all we try to do is keep 1 lane on the side of the hill. You know? So I invite them to drive Red Mountain when they come to see me. And I've had some wild-eyed folks come into my yard. It doesn't even have guardrails. So I told them, well, that's where I take our 16-year-olds for their driver's test. It's a pass-fail. Transportation is going to end up being a bigger deal. One of the things that happens is that when we talk to people, transportation comes up. Almost in every conversation. I think the legislature's having a very hard time figuring out how can we go do transportation and still be able to do all of the things that we found out we like doing. So, it may end up being a referendum for people. Not as to how you get the money, but where you're going to put it. One of the things that's happening right now is over in Denver, they're going to put I-70 underground. $1 billion. And what are we going to do on top of it? Oh, we're going to have a park. Oh, okay. You know, to a farm kid, that doesn't make one lick of sense to me. To the urbanites, evidently it does. And they drive the train. We in western Colorado particularly are subject to them, the benign neglect. Because they drive those roads. I hear people say, it takes me an hour and a half to get home. Okay, but we built you an electric train from your house. Why aren't you using it? Mass transit's not working in Denver. Downtown, it might be with the buses. But the trains that are going out into suburbia are not being used. You know, Americans and Coloradans particularly are independent. If I decide I can go home early, I'm going to, and I don't have to wait for the train. I drive my own car. We, as a Colorado state, need to think about that. I don't think we can force people to change how they act. A lot of governments have tried that, and it turned out to be a bad deal. So I don't think we can actually force them to do that. One of the ideas, too, is that a lot of times when we talk about transportation, we talk about multimodal. Multimodal in western Colorado doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're in town. Bike paths and these kind of things. We're not going to build trains over here because they're too far distant between our communities. The air quality in Denver is getting poorer. More and more cars. We need to address that. One of the things that happened this year is that we did everything we could to entice you to buy an electric car. There are some people in here who probably could afford an electric car. But most of us can't. Only 3% of the cars that are on the state of Colorado are electric. They're growing, but it's not rapidly. In the urban area, there are some. One of the things we did, and this was disturbing to me, is when we put in those charging stations, If you park in one of them, in a gas or diesel engine car, you get a fine of $150 parking ticket. The same fine as if you park in a handicap spot. Okay, for 3% of the cars, we're going to do those kind of heavyweight deals. We're going to allow an electric car to drive down HOV for free because it's an electric car. We're going to allow the investor-owned utilities, that's XL and Black Hills, to build charging stations at the expense of the ratepayer. That's a shift that we've taken. REAs are ruled by different rules, but that one was a very big shift. It was subtle. But putting that on the ratepayer to build those stations for a good business decision. If it's a good business decision, just go do it. Talk to me about how much money you made on it, and we'll all be happy. Now, when they talk to me about, well, it's only going to cost about $1 a month more now. But that's subsidizing things that seem to me that we don't need to be doing. And, you know, I understand we have to do something in regards to traffic, pollution, all of the things. I'm not going to deny that. But picking winners and losers, in my opinion, is not where we ought to be. And there seems to be a real trend of that nowadays, picking winners and losers. Any more questions? Better hurry up, we're about out of time.
I want to raise a local issue, which is HOAs.
Yeah.
There's a law, there's a Colorado law that governs HOAs and has absolutely no teeth. And they recently put HOA managers as a license. They're dropping that as of July. So I don't know what they're going to do, but that's a mandate to the people. Like the county doesn't accept any roads anymore. So if you build a subdivision, you're going to have an HOA whether you like it or not, because the county no longer maintains roads.
We heard that bill about sunsetting HOA licensing. The sunset it said, okay, let's let it go. But there was a bill ran that allows for and will still give licenses to HOAs. I think one of the big things that we don't understand over here on this side of the mountain particularly is what that does to us. In the big cities, their HOAs really talk more about what color you paint your house, what kind of siding you put on your house, and those kind of things, rather than roads, bridges, and infrastructure inside. I think that's a local issue that probably ought to be addressed on a local basis because the licensing of the manager is basically about taking care of your money, so that, you know, they don't break the law. But with the growth in the state of Colorado, and every community is getting it. Now, you know, well, maybe Rocky Ford and some of those communities that sold their water, they may not be growing that fast. The rest of Colorado is growing rapidly. We're seeing it here. By the way, you have a traffic problem.
We're building more roads, we're trying.
Why don't you just put more lanes on? Because I sat through 2 stoplights out here on Spring Creek Road this morning. There's too many people here, we're gonna have to qualify them. You know, when I was in the auto users business, I'll tell you a quick joke. The county manager, I can't remember who he was, but I said, you know, here's what I would do. Anybody who moves into Montrose County, outside of the city of Montrose, they have to live on a cistern for 1 year before they get their certificate of occupancy. The girl that was with him was like, oh, I don't think we can do that. I said, I know, but we need to figure it out so that people know. Just turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth. See another one.
Yes, you know, concerning this contentious vaccination issue, which I think got some traction in the legislature this session, you know, if a parent had a moral or religious objection to bathing their children, or let's say they had a religious moral objection to vitamins, so the poor kid comes down with a case of scurvy, we probably wouldn't allow that. But, you know, vaccinations is the greatest public health advantage to our lives in the last 100 years. So my question to you is, how do you handle this situation where a small minority of parents are demanding that they should be allowed to exempt their children from vaccinations, which puts other kids in danger?
Well, currently, they can still do that. There are religious and exemptions that currently, under the current law, we have. I think that bill probably caught fire because it was at the end of the session. A lot of folks were upset about it. That bill said, if you decide that if you want an exemption, you have to go to the Department of Health and you fill out a form and you're put on a list. That's what the people were worried about, you're put on the list. Currently, if you want an exemption, you go to the school handles it. So that bill probably got a lot of spin on it from both sides. One of the things that there are a lot of people, and these are people that are also immunizing, are concerned that Big Pharma has no liability. So some of those things we're not positive about how bad it could hurt some people. We saw a lot of children that have been harmed. But
bullshit.
Okay.
The kids that have been harmed are the kids that got disease and exposed my kids to disease because of lack of vaccination.
Well, that could be done, but these parents bringing in children that within 3 or 4 days after being immunized, they went into some
Had
state.
nothing to do with the vaccination, Mark.
Okay, you know what, Dr. Cahill, I appreciate your point of view. One of the things we do at Heidi's is we don't yell at our speakers, so I'm just gonna cut you off. I'm gonna let Representative Catlin finish because we have literally 1 minute, so wrap it up.
I got 1
Sorry,
minute.
but that's my fault.
That's okay. I appreciate that. We need to talk. You know, it's a great opportunity to come to town and see the people that are my people. People I grew up with, people I've been friends with. This is a great opportunity for me, and I'm glad that I was invited. You know, we probably rambled on a little bit more this morning than what I probably would have liked to do. But I'm home. If you'd like to visit, get in touch with me. I'll sit down and have a cup of coffee. I'll go to have lunch with you, but you have to buy. No, you can't buy because I'm state representative. So, but anyway, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.